we established a new program since the beginning of my government, so-called Pro-Árbol, Pro-Tree, and it's a program oriented to pay for environmental services that people living in rural communities are providing to everybody, not only in Mexico but also in the world. And let me tell how is this. You see the map in Mexico and you try to pick what are the poorest regions in the country. There are several correlations. The poorest regions are correlated with indigenous communities in the country and are correlated as well with the areas of woods and rainforests in the country. And they are there because other governments, and other time, gave them the land as a way to survive. Actually, there was a deforestation commission in Mexico 30 years ago. Why? Because the idea was to erase the woods or rainforests and to promote agriculture in that part of the land. So we lost a lot of rainforest and wood. So now what is happening with those communities? They have no alternative to live. So the people living in extreme poverty, most of them are indigenous people, and most of them are living in those forest areas. So what we are trying to do, we are trying to change these situations. We are trying to provide economic income for them. So we are paying an amount of money for each hectare of wood or forest range that those communities preserve. And if they decide to switch again from agriculture to forestry, we are paying even more. So we are promoting the payment of environmental services to those communities. We are creating new jobs, for instance, preventing fires in woods or making new reforestations or even commercial plantations in those areas. So we are creating a winning circle, if I can say that. We are trying to change the story of those communities. According to FAO, in the last decade, in Mexico, we lost 350,000 hectares a year on average of these areas of forest. Now, through this program, either in conservation programs to the land or reforestations or commercial plantations, we are recovering almost 500,000 of hectares each year, or at least we reached that goal last year. So we are moving in the right direction in order to preserve our flora and mainly the Mexican woods and the Mexican rainforest. The aim is that all Mexicans be able to live better without destroying the land for future generations. We are aware that our actions are only a piece of the international effort and that every nation must contribute to building an effective response. Climate change demands committed and joint actions. We must all work together to the benefit of all. One of the problems that I am seeing currently is that the Kyoto Protocol has not resulted in a greater commitment from countries. And I think there are several failures coming from the Kyoto Protocol. Probably we need to change the point of view about the problem. For instance, I try to change at least two kinds of paradigms in this. One, for instance, is that to restore the environment is a task for developed countries. And the second, the discussion is what will be the target in terms of emission reductions for the future. But I think we need to change a little bit these paradigms. Why? First, fighting climate change is not a question only of developed countries. Everybody, developed and developing nations, must to act against climate change. So we need to change that point of view. Talking as developing nation is difficult for me because I have some fellows, leaders in developing countries that say, well, this is a problem that industrialized nations provoked. They have enough money to fix that, so they need to fix that. They are right in some sense. But climate change is a problem that everybody must to cooperate, to collaborate to fix. And everybody is able to do something in order to reach our goals. Second point is probably the discussions today is too focused on the goals for the future. And you can listen to formal discussions about this issue, and European Union say 20% of reduction for 2020, but 30% if it's possible that we are all together, and we will reach 50% by 50, and others say, well, 80% by 50, and one say, well, 50%, but starting in 99 basis, and others say, well, 15%, but starting in 2005 basis. And we are losing a lot of time in that discussion. And that's right. And let me anticipate. Mexico will support any of these goals that can create a consensus between the nations. We are ready even to take for ourselves our own goals in Mexico in order to reduce our global emissions. But my point is that we need to change this way of mind. Why? Because the problem for me is not the goals themselves. The problem is that we have not the right instruments to do the job. I mean, there is no sense if we lose another 5 years discussing what will be the right goal. My perception is that we are discussing about the goals by the year 2020, and probably will reach a consensus in the year 2020 or 19. I don't know. But the problem is, okay, we can follow these discussions, and maybe we can reach an agreement about the goals. I will support the goals, but the problem are not the goals. The problem is the lack of right instruments and public policies to reach the goals. And what are those instruments? We need to realize that the instruments that Kyoto created were unuseful for our purposes. The principles under Kyoto Protocol obey only developed nations, and that was not very useful in the goal. So what we need to create is the right instruments to reach the goals. And what are the right instruments? My perception is that the right instruments are the right economic incentives for the countries.